Welcome to the Free West Media YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel by clicking on the subscribe button and even the bell to get notifications. Now today I'm privileged to be talking to Jesper Johansson. He's from Sweden, but he's also just visited South Africa. So I want to ask him a little bit about Sweden and about his impressions of South Africa regarding our politics and our ethnic situation and farm murders and all sorts of other issues. But first of all, let's perhaps get to Sweden. What is the situation currently in Sweden regarding the ethnic composition of your society, and especially the effect that the influx of migrants and so on have had on your society?
Yes, the situation in Sweden has changed over the last 10 to 20 years, and especially since the middle of the 70s, when they made our politicians made a decision that Sweden should become multicultural. And you can see the changes within the demographics. Among the younger ages, the Swedes are now actually in a minority. And when you look at the pictures from school, you don't see that many Swedes anymore. So the immigration has changed Sweden pretty much, I would say.
Yeah, there's that phrase coined by the French author Renaud Camus, the Great Replacement. I mean, would you say you are at the beginning of a great replacement, that ultimately your population might be displaced by the other one incoming? If you're talking about the demographics that at school age or maybe primary school age, the Swedish children are already in the minority.
Yeah, you can say that in my opinion, it's a matter of the exponential function, which means that if you have two cultural differences in how many children one culture choose to have in comparison to another culture, it is just a matter of time if these populations will remain their amount of children that they have over a longer period. And what we see in Sweden, as I said, the younger generations, the Swedes are in a minority. So if this is going to continue, if the immigrants will stick to their way of having many children, while on the other hand the Swedes will stick to their tradition of not having that many children anymore. We used to get many children before. My mother, she gave birth to 4 kids, for example. But today the average, I would believe, is around 2 point something. So, and you compare this to what many of our immigrants give birth to. For example, the Somalians and Iraqis, they give birth to a lot of more children than the Swedes. Then I would say that yes, it's actually just a matter of how many generations you will look into before the replacement, as you talk about, will be a fact.
But now the media in Sweden are of course quite left-wing, the mainstream media, but you work in the alternative media, don't you?
That's right. I work as a freelance journalist since 1.5 years back, and I got the opportunity to work for Roodt in the beginning, and he is the chief editor-in-chief of the newspaper Nya Tider, which is a newspaper that is not controlled by the state-controlled media, as I would call them. We have a situation in Sweden where many of the medias are owned by one and the same family. It's called the Bonnier family.
Yes, I've heard of that.
Yes, and they have their take on how they would like to report on news, and it differs a little bit from the alternative media. The alternative media has a more anti-globalist agenda, whilst the current Bonnier house and the more big medias in Sweden have a more international agenda.
Yeah, and to them the immigration is not a threat to Sweden, and the fact that your population might be displaced or replaced by the incoming immigrants, for them it's not a problem, is it?
Well, in Sweden we don't really talk about ethnicity in that way. We encourage ethnical groups to maintain their own culture heritage, but we don't really talk about ethnicities when it comes to how many people who inhabit a certain job or something like that. It's a little different situation than what you have here in South Africa. So this discussion has not really come up on the table, so to say. So this makes we talk more in cultural terms, and when we talk in cultural terms, we have politicians in Sweden who have said that the Swedish people do not have any own culture. So our politicians, they view the Swedish culture very badly. They don't think that it's a culture worth preserving, and they don't think that the Swedes as a people then is worthy of ruling their own country, I would guess, because otherwise they would have.
But still,
about these terms.
you have your own language in Sweden. Sweden is a monolingual country, more or less, because everything in the restaurants, the menus are in Swedish. All the signs on the roads are in Swedish.
That's about to change, though.
Is that about to change?
Yes, in my old hometown of Malmö, we have a lot of signs out in the shops, which is written in Arabic, because we have gotten many Arabic foreigners coming to Sweden, immigrants. So this is about to change in Malmö, and it's also happening in some other areas in the bigger cities of Sweden.
Okay, but still, you have a long tradition and language and history and an identity that stretches back over centuries, but that all of that is not worth preserving. They want to change it into a multicultural, kind of globalized, Americanized mixture of peoples in your own country.
Well, I'm not sure what they want to transform our nation to, but I can say that they do not consider our history worth maintaining in our consciousness. There were discussions a couple of months or years ago about our history as a great power, because Sweden used to be a great power. We used to
rule Northern Europe and even
correct.
Parts of Germany.
That's correct, and we took part in the 30-year-old war, which was a war between the Protestants and the Catholics, and we had a lot of lands, and this is an era in the Swedish history that actually brings pride to the Swedish people. It can bring pride, and whether or not it brings pride, it's anyway a part of our history, and we should learn about it. But there were discussions in Sweden on whether or not you should stop teaching this period in our history. So when you remove the ability for Swedes to be proud of something, you will get a people that is not really eager to say no when things happen that is bad for them in their nation.
Yes, exactly. Now, Sweden has also played a big role in sponsoring the ANC to come to power in South Africa. I think I referred in a previous discussion we had to a statement by Mr. Anders Moraman, who is a previous ambassador of Sweden to South Africa, and he said on the Afrikaans radio station RSG, or RSG as we call it, that without Sweden the ANC would never have come to power in South Africa. Now, you've been traveling through the country and you've now investigated a lot of what's going on in South Africa. Would you say that Sweden had a positive influence on South Africa?
It's difficult for me to say because I have never experienced South Africa before 1994, but I can bring up to you and say what I've heard from other persons who have experienced, who are South Africans, and they say that this change has not really been good to the people of South Africa. It hasn't been good for the whites because of the BEE, because of their problems to get job, because they get laid off, and it hasn't been good for the blacks either, because I've spoken to some blacks who said that they're being attacked for being foreigners in this country. So, and also because of the economy is going down, the corruption is growing. So almost everybody I've been talking to, they have been very critical of this change in the political route that South Africa has taken. And to me as a Swede, it's a bit problematic to hear that our money has not been part of building this nation, because you have great opportunities to make a great country out of South Africa. And as far as I'm concerned, South Africa has been a really good nation when it comes to both the military and the farming industry and a lot of things that is now plummeting. The security situation for the farmers that is being attacked, and security situation for people on the streets, attacks and rapes and everything. So it makes me sad to hear that our money has actually not improved in the opinion of the South African people.
Yes, exactly. And do you think there is scope for cooperation between, say, Europeans and Swedes and South Africans trying to change this country for the better, or to stop the rot that's taking place here, under this extremist kind of quasi-Afro-Marxist government? Do you think there is scope for that? What you're seeing, what you're hearing in Sweden from people? Because I gather that there's still quite a lot of publicity, especially in the alternative media in Sweden, about South Africa.
There's some coverage in the alternative media. It's not as much as it could be. It could be even more, in my opinion, because the way I view South Africa is like the canary in the coal mine. You are already a minority in a nation that used to work very good for you, and also for the other peoples of South Africa, as far as I've heard. So I think the alternative media could cover your situation even more. However, that is not the point. But let's hope that will change. And also I believe that it's very important that the world has its eyes on South Africa, because with the current political trend that is taking place in the world now, we see how our politicians in the different Western countries have adopted the same system and the same rules and guidelines that you have here.
Yes, a lot of the multinational companies in other countries in Europe, they are also applying affirmative action, and they've got diversity programs, even though they are not, in this country they are legally forced to do that, but in many European countries, or even in the US, it might not be compulsory for them to do that, but they see it as politically correct, and they want, the management of those globalist kind of multinational companies, they apply it anyway. So you are also feeling the first effects of a kind of a planetary BEE and affirmative action in Europe.
That is my impression. We are feeling in Sweden. It's not the same way as in South Africa, where, as far as I have understood, you get these guidelines from your government. In Sweden, many of these companies, as you were talking about, the bigger companies have started, and this is just the last 6 or 7 months in Sweden, they have started to adopt this political correctness onto whom they want to make business with. So this has become a very strange situation for people who are running their own businesses, and, for example, write something critical on the internet or social media about Black Lives Matter, on how they riot and loot.
Yes, you told me about one entrepreneur in Sweden who had his own business. He was supplying the vegan industry with food, and then he made a statement about Black Lives Matter.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, he was watching how parts of the American cities were destroyed, how the rioters looted shops, and he was making some sarcastic comments about their behavior. He wrote it like "Black looters matter" and "Black rioters matter," in order to, criticize them in a way. But just in a matter of 12 hours, all of his bigger customers who used to buy his vegan products, they turned him the back. They didn't want to make business with him anymore. And he had his company for 10 years, and the company was making a 21 million Swedish kroner a year. So it was a very successful company. But within 12 hours, all of his bigger customers just turned him their backs, and he is now actually closing down his firm.
Yeah, so political correctness can, in a country like Sweden, put somebody out of business within 12 hours simply because he made a comment about Black Lives Matter. So yes. You already also seeing the effect of this kind of political correctness and they call it a cancel culture as
exactly.
well.
The cancel culture, yes. And it's but the difference from South Africa is, as I mentioned, not through the state. It comes from the bigger companies, and this is also a problem when it comes to people who criticize people who have some political views that banks do not approve with. Then they have chosen to not let them have an account in their bank. And this is, according to me, everyone should be able to have any political opinion they wish. It should not be up to a big company, a multinational company, or a state to decide what people are allowed to say or think, or which group they are allowed to participate in. So what will then be the next step if we do not stop this cancel culture? It could be like you live in the countryside of South Africa and you are a part of a political party and you would like to go to a gasoline station and buy gas for your car, but you're not allowed to do that because the owner says no, you're not allowed to do this because we don't like your political opinions. And this is happening in Sweden. Like the restaurants, we have a party in Sweden called the Sweden Democrats, and sometimes when they come into a restaurant, they get rejected if they are a famous Sweden Democrat politician. They are not allowed to enter the restaurant. They say, we do not serve you. So this is something that is happening in Sweden through the privately owned companies, and it's a dangerous development, I think.
Yes, and then we've also got these huge big tech companies like Google and Facebook and Twitter, and they are applying censorship to alternative media and to certain opinions that get expressed on their platforms. And therefore it's no longer as in the old Soviet Union or East Germany where the state applies the censorship. It's now coming from these global high-tech corporations who are applying censorship to us and creating this artificial reality that we're not allowed to criticize.
Yes, and we can see how the president of the United States, or the previous, I don't know what to say now, Donald Trump, he's been criticizing this, how Twitter actually censored him during his presidential campaign. And this is a big problem. I mean, for me, freedom of speech is very important. It's the most sacred thing we have in our Western countries, because according to me, the freedom of speech is the foundation on which you build a highly functional society. And if you are not allowed to express your thoughts, good or bad, then you may never have a discussion on which path you as a collective should choose in order to build your best society. And I can't see how the powers that be don't realize this. So it's a very dangerous development when freedom of speech gets suppressed, in my opinion.
But there is a growing alternative media sector in Sweden, won't you say?
Definitely, I would say so. I don't have the figures in my head, but a couple of years ago we were the country in the world that had the highest amount of alternative media, or free media, we can call it also. And when you look at the family who owns a lot of the biggest newspapers in Sweden, it's the same family as I told you before. This have created a vacuum for a certain type of questions that has not been discussed in the Swedish media. So we have now 5 bigger media, and I work with all of them actually. 5 bigger channels, and one is called Svensk Webbtelevision. It has 63,000 subscribers on YouTube, and we have Samhällsnytt 22,000, and we have Exakt 24, 26,000, and yeah, it's growing very much, this alternative media in Sweden, and I think it's because the established media have not really spoken freely enough. They haven't allowed a free debate on certain issues, for example, like the immigration situation in Sweden and the criminality and stuff like that. So yes, we do have a really big alternative media in Sweden.
So at least there's hope for the future in that public opinion could eventually turn against these absurdities and for example, this cancel culture that you're experiencing and people being refused restaurants simply on the basis of belonging to a certain political party.
Yes, I think people will definitely turn against this development, and I think they already have done in one way. It's just that the established media don't really write about it. It's only the free media who is commenting on this, because the established media is not very in favor of this type of freedoms.
And how did you experience South Africa as a country, the nature and the climate and the people?
Well, the nature is amazing. It's a very diverse country. We have the mountains up here in the northeastern parts of the country, and we have actually I've mostly been up here, so I can't really say about the other parts, but it's a beautiful country, and you can grow fruits. I can really understand why the foretrekkers choose to settle in this area, because it's very nice weather. It's a beautiful country, and the people also have been very shaped by this conflicts that the settlers or the white populations have been experiencing through centuries. So all of the people I have met have been very friendly and very driven. They are very motivated. They keep on struggling. They keep on fighting for a better day for themselves and for their kids, and it's very inspiring to see. As a Swede, our society in Sweden is it's of course starting to change now. We get a more violent situation in Sweden, but prior to that we've been very lucky. Have not been at war since, I believe, 1809, and we as a collective, we have not experienced hard times in the same way that your people have done. So I think that your people have experienced all of these troubles and all of these hard times have actually made you a really strong and really positive people, although you are opposed to all of these hard times and hard things that is coming towards you.
Okay, well, thank you for that comment, and I think on that note, thank you for talking to us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me, Tom.
It's a great pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and we look forward to seeing you again on this channel.